New research. The Cascadia Fault is not what we thought it is. It's completely different. The big one, the big Megathrust earthquake that will destroy the beautiful Pacific Northwest. The Cascadia Fault that goes from Northern California alongside Oregon, alongside the state of Washington, and into Canada, alongside Vancouver Island in British Columbia. The dangerous fault that we're all so afraid of, me included, because I live in the Pacific Northwest. That Megathrust earthquake that is said to be overdue and could produce a magnitude 9+ earthquake plus a tsunami within 8 to 10 minutes after the earthquake, that would devastate the coast. How experts are saying would rip open the Pacific Northwest, would destroy everything at least west of I-5. And recent studies I've just reported about this said the land would sink at least 6 feet. And that would mean when the tsunami comes, coastal communities would even be more vulnerable. But is the Pacific Northwest really what we thought it is? That's the big question. Because there's no research from the University of Washington. And that could completely alter everything we thought we knew. New research from the University of Washington investigates whether a large, continuous Megaplay Fault running on the full length of the Cascadia Subduction Zone, that's from offshore Vancouver Island down to Northern California. This is a subduction zone where two tectonic plates are subducting. One subducts underneath the other one. And of course, that is actively contributing to tsunami generation in case of the earthquake. So these new findings, and they're based with scientific evidence, are more than meaningful, guys. They're somewhat unexpected. And I have to say it again, groundbreaking. They found no evidence for a continuous active Megaplay Fault. So now you might ask the question, what is she talking about? What does that mean? So let's dissect that, because this is big. And I want to thank one of my viewers who went to my Buy Me a Coffee site, where you can support this channel, by the way, link is in the description, and gave me a link to the new findings. So thank you, France. I don't know how to pronounce this, let me know. Thank you for that, because now we will all know what this is about. So what is clear now? The Cascadia Subduction Zone looks a little different than researchers thought so far. And what does that mean for the big one? But first, what is a Megaplay Fault? A Megaplay Fault branches upwards from the subduction zone. And in the event of the big one, the Megathrust earthquake, it would raise the seafloor and displace a massive amount of water closer to the coast. So that's how this tsunami will originate if we see the big one. By lifting up the seafloor, it generates that wave. If you sit in a bathtub and your legs are underwater and you lift them up, well, it starts shaking, and if the water's full enough, it goes over the edges. You create your own bathtub tsunami. So a Megaplay Fault is largely a secondary fault that branches off from the main fault of the subduction zone. That is called the Megathrust. And it cuts up towards the seafloor at a steeper angle. Subduction zones occur where one tectonic plate dives under another, and the main megathrust is the long, gently dipping fault between the two plates, the Cascadia Fault. And this is what ruptures in a massive earthquake. A Megaplay Fault is like a shortcut fault that branches upward from that main megathrust fault, and it reaches the seafloor more directly. And because, as I just said, these Megaplay Faults lift the seafloor more suddenly and closer to shore than the deeper megathrusts. And this can cause larger and faster arriving tsunamis, especially if the rupture reaches shallow depth. The steeper angle can transfer more stress to the shallow crust, increasing shaking intensity and landslide potential. And we do have real world examples, unfortunately. The 2004 Sumatra earthquake and the 2011 Tohoku, Japan earthquake involved Megaplay Fault ruptures. And they have amplified tsunami heights far more than originally expected. So you might probably guess the news might not be so good, but it varies, and that's the interesting thing. Because when it comes to Cascadia, the scientists used to think a continuous Megaplay fault might exist along the entire Cascadia margin. Same like the fault, like from Vancouver Island to Northern California. But now the new studies show that no such continuous Megaplay fault exists. So, and that does somewhat lower extreme tsunami projections, but the danger remains very, very high from the main megathrust. So what I want to make clear with this new study, although the hazards might look different, that does not mean the risk is less. That's what the researchers really stress. So this is interesting, right? So one feature that they thought would be in place along the whole Cascadia Fault is missing in some places. So my first thought was, okay, let's find out where. Maybe it's missing where I am, right? If this is the thing that even amplifies the tsunami. I mean, let's be clear. If the big one hits, if the Cascadia Fault ruptures, the tsunami will be bad enough already. So the current projections are up to 100 feet, 30 meters, something like that. Does that factor in the Megaplay Fault already? I think we will have to wait a few more weeks until this brand new research until they take it even further. But how have they conducted this research and how did they find out about this? That is really important too, because then it gets clear that this is not just a guess. So tsunami risk is different in some places, but maybe not less, maybe just different. So the interesting thing is, a group with students and researchers from multiple universities, they have conducted a study and an expedition in 2021 out on the ocean to see what's going on, to really try to have a look at the fault that's there. So they were using a ship that is capable, it's called, of seismic reflection imaging. While I explain that, I'd like you to have a look at this graphic. So you see the boat above the water, and then you see the subduction fault, right? You see it's subducting underneath each other. They're moving. So the yellow stuff is moving in one direction, the blue stuff is grinding underneath. So seismic reflection imaging that they're using, and you can see the red lines. It's a powerful geophysical technique used to create pictures of underground structures. A fault is an underground structure, like the Cascadia Fault, underwater volcanoes, sediment layers, and volcanic magma chambers. That is something they should do more often. They analyze how sound waves travel, how they bounce off of different layers beneath the Earth's surface. So the sound waves are generated at the surface, or like offshore in this case. And they're using like small explosions, like an air gun in the ocean. And then these waves travel through the earth or the ocean until they hit a boundary between different rock types, between sediment and bedrock, for example. At each boundary, part of the wave energy is reflected back to the source, back to the surface, back to the boat. And they have sensors that are called geophones or hydrophones in water. Here we're in the water. They record the returning echoes. You see the red lines. It goes down, it comes back up. And then computers and right now AI, which is super, super helpful, they use these arrival times and the strength of these echoes to reconstruct a 2D or even 3D image of the subsurface. They have used this at Campi Flegrei. I've reported about this, and the results were scary, what they discovered. So you should watch my Campi Flegrei playlist, because that's really scary. So what are they learning from this? It shows layer boundaries like sediment thickness or buried faults, fractures, subduction zones, magma reservoirs, megathrusts. And it helps to determine if a megasplay fault exists or not. So in this case, the researchers have towed sensors behind the boat off the coast of Washington and also Oregon. And they have used reflection imaging to peer deep beneath the seafloor looking for the megasplay fault. To find out, is there this deep, steep megasplay fault that could lift the seafloor in case of a big quake? And they did not find a continuous megasplay fault. That was a big, big surprise. So by using the seismic reflection imaging, they were able to see what the subduction zone looks like miles beneath the seafloor. And I have reported not long ago, for some reason, not many of you were watching this video. You're never watching the technical stuff, only if it rattles, it seems, but you should really watch that. They have a new technique. They have 12 new satellites that are surveilling fault lines like the San Andreas Fault, and they can surveil even the most remote fault lines in the ocean everywhere. And in real time, they can find out if this thing moves. The width of a hair, they can track that. They can tell you Cascadia Fault moved, San Andreas Fault moved. So a few countries are already taking part in this, and I think this is revolutionizing. So now they have images of the geology of the Cascadia Subduction Zone in great detail, which I appreciate. I'm glad about this. But what they found was really surprising. They did not think. There wasn't much evidence that this megasplay fault exists. Director of the Pacific Northwest Seismic Network and University of Washington professor said, quote, "There are places where there looks like there's an active splay fault that matches the sort of position and description, but not everywhere." So the researchers are saying, and yeah, absolutely, this finding presents a major change in the way researchers will now have to think about the Cascadia Subduction Zone, the Cascadia Fault, and the offshore structure of this Cascadia Subduction Zone. And of course, then they probably have to change their perception of how would this look if we see the big one? What could really happen? What are the scenario for potential tsunamis? And where are the tsunami hazards maybe bigger or smaller? Or how does this change the hazard maps in the aftermath of the catastrophic big one, the Megathrust Earthquake? They have released an interesting diagram. So where they think there is something, a megasplay fault along the Cascadia Subduction Zone, and where they think there's not. So when we look at this, the thick black lines that have these 90-degree things stepping out, I don't know how to describe that, but I'll point it out. This is a megasplay fault. And then they have smaller ones where they think it's a splay fault, and then they have these diagrams strike slip fault. But what we have here, the outer wedge, that's the light beige area, and I really wish they would give us locations where that is, or they actually do. Okay, it starts at northern Vancouver Island. I think we're actually looking to the right. There is Vancouver Island, and then central Vancouver Island, So on Vancouver Island, there is some Megaplay Fault. I mean, if we look at where the Cascadia Fault runs, Vancouver Island gets the biggest tsunami anyways. Vancouver, a little bit weaker. But Vancouver Island, if you're on the west coast of Vancouver Island and Victoria, I have made videos about this, not that great. And then it shows us Astoria, between Astoria and Tillamook, there's another one, but it's not super, super big. Is that Cannon Beach? Is that my favorite place? That would be, yeah, it looks like that. This is Warrenton Seaside, Cannon Beach. I'm really sad about that, guys. I love that place. I really have to say, this is so beautiful there. The beaches and the access to the beaches, and you can take the dogs. Nobody says anything. So this is really, yeah. And then we go down to Tillamook, and it doesn't even show us down to Northern California. So it looks like we have two major Megaplay Faults. One, I call this area Cannon Beach, but you know what I mean. And the other one, it seems like the northern tip of the Olympic Peninsula. But probably, yeah, southern Vancouver Island. It's hard to tell from that map, but it looks like that these are the two that are of interest. So we do not have one continuous splay fault that runs the whole length of the subduction zone, and that would just produce some sort of uniform tsunami that would hit the shoreline from Northern California all the way up to Vancouver Islands. So what the scientists take from this, they need to make new models. And these new models need to predict what could happen in the aftermath of the big one, now that they know more about these Megaplay Fault. So they say we need to take a closer look at this and then predict the tsunami hazard, area by area, section by section. But even, guys, please be aware of this. Yes, in the area where it's the Megaplay Fault, where we saw these dark black lines, probably there it's worse, but it's really, really bad already along the whole Cascadia Fault. So especially in southern Washington, they're saying near Grace Harbor County, around the Willapa Bay region, a splay fault could send a tsunami hurtling down the coast within 10 or so minutes. And then they say that areas further north may have more time to react than previously believed. In these places, the tsunami may originate between 20 to 50 miles further west. And that's a big difference, because then the tsunami, it takes longer until it reaches the shore. It gives you more time to get away. And this is crucial because, guys, think about this. You're on the beach, the Megathrust earthquake hits, liquefaction, the land is sinking 6 feet. Roads will be cracked. It's not like, okay, now I'm getting in my car, I'm getting to higher ground. You might not be able to walk very fast and you have to seek higher ground. So whether you have 8 to 15 minutes or maybe longer makes a big difference. With these new findings, some areas could have 20 to 30 minutes time potentially to get to safety. That is a game changer. Really, it is a game changer. So right now they're running new models with these updated information and data that they got about the Cascadia Subduction Zone. And hopefully very, very soon, we will have a better picture what this non-existence, this absence of this Megaplay Fault in some areas, how that will affect the big one, the whole event. So hopefully that's what they're saying. Within the next year or two, we will know more. And honestly, guys, I can't wait. I really can't wait. This is mega, mega interesting, groundbreaking. So if you like that, guys, leave this video a like, and you know what to do. Share it with your friends, become a subscriber. If you want to support the channel, the links are in the description, the coffee, you can join the channel as a supporting member. And thanks for everyone who's doing this. Thanks for the supers. Thanks for the coffees. I see you on the coffee site. I see you here. Hopefully soon, guys. Stay safe. Bye-bye.